Hey there, thanks for joining us on the Chief Executive Aviator. I'm Simon Turner, your host, and you're wondering what we're all about. Well, we're pilots who happen to run businesses, or maybe we're business people who happen to fly. Either way, we've figured out that flying gives us a serious edge. Every week, I sit down with another pilot entrepreneur or executive who's discovered that their plane isn't just some cool ride, it's actually a secret weapon for growing their business. We're talking real stories about landing deals and actual landings, expanding markets, and yes, still making it home in time for dinner. Whether you're already flying for business or you're just dreaming about it, you're going to hear some pretty amazing stories about how aviation changes the trajectory of lives and businesses every day. So get your pre-flight done. We've got a great conversation headed your way. John, great to have you here, everyone. We've got John Peterson here on the Chief Executive Aviator podcast today. John runs Westoplex Garage, but is also a former PGA Tour pro, if I'm right, and is a pilot and uses his aircraft in his business. Maybe, John, just start by giving yourself an introduction, and then we'll learn a little bit about what made you become a pilot.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on with me. Just an entrepreneurial mindset from a young age, and always wanted to be a pilot. Always wanted to, but happened to get really good at golf in college, and then got good enough to where my coach at LSU was convinced that I could play professionally. So when I signed with LSU in high school, my intentions were never to be a professional golfer. I never thought that, oh, I'm going to play on the PGA Tour one day. That's going to be my job. No, I LSU because I got a scholarship there, and I'm the oldest of four kids, and so a college scholarship was a big deal to my parents. So I just thought, I'm going to go to college and play golf, and that's my means of getting a degree. So went to LSU, and then worked hard and got good enough to play professionally. So did that for 8 years, 5 of them on the PGA Tour, and then 3 of them on the Korn Ferry Tour, which is kind of the AAA of the PGA Tour. So had 2 wrist surgeries, left and right, on both of my hands. One was in 16 and one was in 19, and the one in 19 took me out of the game. So after that, I went through what every professional athlete kind of has. They have a identity crisis, for lack of a better term. And they don't really know what the next steps are. I didn't make enough money to sit on my butt for the rest of my life. I've got 4 kids, got a wife, right? So I had a little bit of a buffer there for a few years where I was able to, take what I had made and figure it out, right? And that became the lifelong dream of flying. Is when that in 2019 happened. I said, okay, well, now I have the time to go through flight school. So during COVID, I started going to flight school here in Fort Worth, out at Nationwide Aviation at Parker County Airport, which is one of the better, they call it a good leisure flight school, right? And if you're familiar with ATP and all of these other flight schools, that's a career-driven flight school where you take out a big loan, and usually you don't have a ton of money to be able to pay for it. So you take out a big loan against, your future earnings. And then once you become a professional pilot, you start paying it back. Well, this was a leisure flight school where it was guys like me that had one career, or they had sold a business, or something where they had a windfall where they were able to afford to go to flight school, because it's ridiculously expensive, as you know. And so I started private pilot training in 2020. It took me about 8 months to get my PPL, and then I went another 8 and got IFR after that. So by about spring of 2021, I was an instrument rated private pilot and started looking at airplanes as the next progression, right? So I actually cashed out my PGA Tour retirement to buy a Cherokee 6 300 and flew it for about 18 months. Then we sold it, and I have another one that we just got back, new avionics. And then Westoplex came around in 2023, and unfortunately I have less time to fly because the business is which is a good thing, but I do miss, yesterday it was a Bluebird day. It was just a perfect day to fly, and I'm working. So, but I did get all the hard part out of the way while I had the time. So, long story short, for about 12 years there, that's the Cliff Notes version of how I became a pilot, and I still use it, 2 or 3 times a month, going around the state, bidding jobs and going to Louisiana for LSU football games.
Nice one. That's some good use of flying. Was there something that sort of like sparked your interest into aviation as a kid or anything like that?
So my great grandfather was
Hmm.
a Corsair pilot in World War II. He was on aircraft carriers too, so he was a bad dude. He got shot down 3 times, survived all of them. Countless kills in World War II. I have his aviation medal hanging in my office. I've got his
Hmm.
watch. If you're familiar with World War II and those pilots,
Yeah.
they usually made their own flying watches.
Hmm.
And if I took it down the other day, it's 100 years old almost, and I
Yeah.
shook it just a little bit, and that thing fired right up. So as a young kid, hearing stories about Uncle Dick, I wanted to fly, as a kid. And then
Yeah.
when I was playing on tour, there's a guy named Morgan Hoffman, who's my
Hmm.
age. He went to Oklahoma State, but he had a Lance. He had a Piper Lance, and he would fly himself to all the tournaments. And I just thought that was the coolest
Yeah.
thing ever. I was like, man, I've wanted to do this forever. I don't have the time while I'm playing golf. One day I'm going to get there. And
Nice.
there was another guy named George McNeil who had a twin Cessna. I think he had a 421,
Yeah.
and he would do the same thing. And they'd bring guys with them, and it's a cheat code, as you know. And once you get past all the big expenses, it's so economical to fly yourself to tournaments. And I never got to do it while I was playing, but that's kind of what sparked my interest as a young child, and then as a young man in my first career.
How cool. Yeah, we're going to talk to Maverick McNeely, who's also a pilot and flies himself around in the Cirrus to and from tournaments. So we're going to do that episode here in a few weeks. But you had a similar kind of entrance into aviation as me. My grandfather was a pilot in World War II. Also got didn't get shot down, but had an engine out behind enemy lines. Crashed into a rice field in Borneo or Burma or something, and had to walk 2 weeks back to the airfield. And the day he was a major, so he was a pretty high-ranking officer, but he walked onto the field and the commanding officer told him to have a shower and a shave and sent him back up at 1 o'clock that afternoon to do another mission.
Wow.
And he was in his 20s. And I think of like when I'm having a bad day, I'm like, nothing on what those guys all went through, getting shot down 3 times in the ocean and somehow still surviving. Truly amazing. But you got your pilot's license but when did you realize like, hey, this can actually be a tool to help grow the business? Because you're in Fort Worth, but you're obviously now doing jobs all around if you're flying around the state.
Hmm. Yeah, we do some work in Houston. We do some work west of here. And honestly, Houston's not that far of a drive. It's 3.5, 4 hours. But when I can get there in 45 minutes to an hour, come back for dinner with my family and do a whole day's work at the same time, it becomes a balancing act of money versus time, right? When you get to be in your
Mm-hmm.
30s, your late 30s, especially for me, I started realizing that my time at home was worth more than a dollar amount I could make if I stayed there, or if I stayed overnight in a hotel and did another job. I can still do all those things and be home, right? So, sure, yeah, my dry rate, at $100 an hour with $5 gas, it cost me about $400 coming back and forth to Houston, but I'm back home, you know. Then I'm not getting a hotel overnight and driving 4 hours back and missing the morning work of the next day. It became to where it made so much sense for me to be back in time with my family because, like I say, I've got 4 kids. They're under 8 years old. Like, this is the time I need to be with them. Time became more valuable than the money for me, and it didn't start like that either. I started because I loved it, and I think that's how all pilots begin. Is that we love aviation, but then once you're through your ratings and you're staying current, you start to realize the benefits of it years down the road. Oh man, I'm really glad I did this because now my better, right? So that's what it's become for me. It is a business tool, but really I just love flying.
Yeah, it's so many entrepreneurial aviators that I talk to. Sometimes will even, oh, I've got to get to the other side of the city. I'll just fly because it's more fun. Basically, might not really save time. In your case, going across the Metroplex probably does save time to fly Fort Worth over to the other side. But often it's driven by fun. But at the same time, what you just talked about with your family is such a common sentiment. Is I can get home and back in a day, or I can be gone for 2 days, not 4 days. Lose a day of travel in between, or that kind of thing. Do you remember what the first trip you took that was like a business trip? Or was for work, and how that felt of like the independence of getting out of the plane and saying, I flew myself to this?
Well, yeah, I do. I went down to Baton Rouge, which it originally had been for leisure, and then I get there, and we had a meeting with a door company down there out of nowhere that they just knew I was in town. And yeah, I got out of the airplane and started getting all my LSU gear out, and I got a phone call from a buddy of mine who knew I was in town. He was like, "Hey, this guy wants to meet." And I was like, "Okay, cool, we'll meet." And it really hadn't fabricated into anything yet, but what it did was spark an interest in expanding the business south, um, which that would have never happened if I would have driven down there and been, crunched on time to get to the LSU game. Now I've got 4 or 5 hours to burn. Sure, I'll go have a conversation real quick, and we're talking about expanding the business down there to Baton Rouge. So it's little things like that where I wouldn't have had the flexibility enabled by the airplane to take that meeting. But no, it is. It really is. It's like you start going someplace in this thing, and it can turn into something that you never knew happened when you took off. So I love that, all my friends have my tail number, and I think I swear to God, they have their notifications set when I get airborne. You know, I land, they're like, dude, nice flight, man. You made great time, because they know my airspeeds, they know all of the stuff I log.
Yeah,
It's funny that, the world can track you wherever you go.
totally. We have the same thing with our pilots group down at Tulsa Riverside here. They've all got the notifications set up on on flight radar or whatever. So I always get, every time I take off or land, I'm getting text messages. Where are you going?
Right,
Can I
right,
come?
yeah.
It's all this stuff. Do you have like a deal that you? I mean, that's this thing in Baton Rouge sounds pretty cool. But do you have a deal that you were able to, close because you were able to fly there, or business you've been able to get because you've got the plane?
Right now, we're working on a pretty big door deal in Houston. There's 27 doors on a self-storage facility that's going straight up, right? They need to be wind loaded because of all the hurricanes and stuff in Houston. So I've been talking back with the PM back and forth, and he's actually in South Carolina, so he's really not present all the time. But I told him, I said, look, man, like you give me an hour heads up, and I can be there in 2 hours. Like it's just the flexibility of that. Me me compared to my competitors I'm bidding against, even if they're in Houston, I can beat them there most of the time. So like that gives us a massive advantage business wise within the company to where the guy that's doing all of the bidding and is on site myself is able to beat guys that are 30 minutes from the job site in a town 4 hours away if you're driving. So they know that, and I can get my eyes on it with just a short notice, and that really gives us a advantage business wise in the bidding and the completion of the project.
Cool. What do they think when you roll up in the Crown Vic crew car? Like, is this guy a cop?
Well, as you know, it depends on the airport, right? So
It
some
does, yeah.
airports, yeah, you've got a 1998 Crown Vic with a spotlight that doesn't work on the
Yeah.
front, and then other airports like Hobby or bigger places down in Houston, they've got some of them have Mercedes and
Yeah.
nice brand new Toyota Camrys and all that. So it kind of depends. Like we'll go to Podunk Airport and yeah, you get the shot up police car, but sometimes you
Yep.
do get a luxury vehicle. But then you'll get a takeoff fee from a big Bravo airport a month later.
Totally.
Those are
Yeah.
frustrating. It's like, I paid a massive landing fee just to land my little weed eater here. You know,
Yeah.
then you're gonna charge
Yeah.
me $30 to take off again? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah. That's
frustrate
like true.
the hell out of me, but it's just part of the gig.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like true European. I don't know if you've seen, but in Europe, every airport basically you land at, you have to pay this huge fee out. That's pretty rare in the US. But yeah, when you go into one of those big Bravos, then you got to pay a landing fee and then like a ramp fee to the FBO and all that sort of. God, it can be pretty frustrating. But then when you
roll out of like a nice FBO and they've got like a brand new Tesla or some Mercedes, it's not so bad to have to pay a little bit of a fee to get
I'll
into
go
that
ahead
thing.
and
You drive somewhere else
like,
for free.
you get me in a
Yeah,
C-class Mercedes, I'll kind of not. I'll forget about the takeoff fee pretty quick.
yeah. Nice one. And for everyone who's probably listening, probably just heard the rumble over you. You told me you were right next to the Lockheed Airport down there, so it's probably an F-35 or something rolling over the top of your house. I don't know how you get any work done, or your office, I should say, but I would be out there every 2 seconds. There was just I heard a Piaggio fly over my house, and I was itching to go and look, but I'm like, I'm on a podcast, I can't do that. In terms of ROI, you talked a little bit about it. Do you kind of like calculate every flight or anything like that, or do you just kind of like it's the intrinsic ROI of being able to get there quickly and get a deal done, or do you try to kind of like balance, all right, this is going to cost me 400, maybe I could drive, that sort of thing?
No, if I have the option to fly, I always fly. I just
Yep.
because I don't really get it that often. So if I have the option to fly, I do because when you can mix work with flying, man, it's a
Yeah.
treat. Especially after the hard
Yeah.
work it takes to do all of the stuff that's necessary from the FAA and complying with all of your airplane stuff that you have to get done every year. When you're complying with all that and you've done all the work,
Hmm.
it really doesn't make sense to not use it once all that's done. Because I mean, there are so many ADs and things you have to comply with your airplane alone every year. With annuals and fixing the little bitty things that really aren't necessary that you have to do. Once you get done with all that stuff, in my opinion, it's just stupid to drive when you are a legal current pilot with a current airplane and you legally do this right now. Like I don't think about it. I just get in the airplane and take off.
Nice. Yeah, it's when you've paid all the money to have your compass calibrated and got the compass card in your logbook, you want to actually go and use
Right.
that from paying the AMP $150 to
Right.
do it. It's always things like that. I'm like, it's time for the FAA to kind of like get up to speed with the real
Exactly.
world. In terms of switching gears a little bit more to like the family side, you mentioned a bit about your family and kind of putting a value on the family time, which I think is really, really important. It's usually not until you're in your late 30s or whatever, and you've got kids that are kind of coming of age to some degree where you're like, oh, I actually have to be around for this because they're not going to be around, in my house much longer, or the time goes so quickly. Have you got a time where flying yourself kind of made the difference between missing or making a family event or kids thing or something like that?
I don't really have a specific example of that, but I will say
Mm-hmm.
flying for me with my kids and my wife, there's nothing that beats it. I've used
Yeah.
it, we use it at least two football games a year to Baton Rouge. I mean, Baton Rouge is a 7.5 hour drive, but you've got to go east straight and then south and
Yeah.
then east again. So there's not a really great way to get there. But you take off out of Parker
Mm-hmm.
County in Weatherford and they clear you direct to Baton Rouge. That's a straight line, and you're there in 2 hours. And my son, who's 7, he is starting to get really interested in aviation too. He walks around schools telling his friends that my dad drives a plane, and he drives a plane here. And we just got our avionics redone in the Cherokee Six,
Nice.
and it was gone for 3 months over in North Carolina. But our first flight, when we were ferrying it back from North Carolina, we stopped in Knoxville, but we didn't take off till like 5:30 p.m. And as you know, in Knoxville, that's a Charlie, right? McGee Tyson,
Uh huh.
and we're coming, from the East Coast, so you have to go over the I think it's the Blue Ridge. I think it's the Blue Ridge Mountains. Anyway, there's a mountain range
Yep.
there, and the clouds had come down where the mountaintops were over the clouds, and brand new avionics, this airplane was basic, and I learned on steam, so thank God I learned on steam.
Yeah.
The very first flight we took in this thing, we had to come shoot an approach into McGee Tyson at night in the dark through the clouds over the mountains, and it was awesome. Like
Yeah.
750 with the dual G5s and the G500. I mean, all you do is press buttons, and you're actually
Yeah.
bored when you're on the approach, which you don't have to hand fly anything. And
Yep. Yeah, it'll basically crash you into the numbers
It
with
will.
the GFC
And
fiber.
we landed in Tyson and taxied over and got the crew car to the hotel. And I was just thinking on the way there, I was like, man, that was almost boring. Uh, with
Yeah.
how easy flying an approach, a difficult approach. It wasn't minimums or
Yeah.
anything, but we had to
Uh-huh.
we had to go through about 1,500 feet of clouds, and then we popped out at about 700 feet. But still, like you're done. Like you program
Yeah.
it, flies it, and you just land the airplane. Like before with
So
steam,
good.
right? You're tracking the needle, and you're too high, you're too low, and you're always
Yeah.
adjusting. And
Yeah.
with this, it's just nailing it the whole time. The very first flight, though, that was I'll never forget that flight, how easy it was, and how I was kind of pissed having to spend so much money getting all this stuff, and then immediately not mad, 2 hours later when we landed in Knoxville because it just made my life so much easier.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I've got a very similar setup in my plane, and it makes it an absolute dream to do things like that. It certainly adds to the safety factor, probably as well. On memorable kind of flights like that, what's the most memorable kind of like aviation destination you've done with your family? You've gone to LSU games a whole bunch, which is always cool and good memories. But is there anywhere else that you would say is like, hey, we were able to go and do this, and it was
Yeah,
amazing?
there was no way I could have gone to the College World Series in 2023 in Omaha without the
Uh
airplane.
huh.
So I'm not see, one of my downfalls as a pilot is I don't prep very well. I'm not a nerd about weather. I should be. I will check, but I don't
Yeah.
get into the nuts and bolts of weather like I should, which is not a great attribute for a pilot. But at the same time, the day before the World Series, I didn't have a ticket. My brother wanted to
Uh
go.
huh.
My brother went to LSU, and we had another buddy that wanted to go too, who also went to LSU, and we're playing Florida in the finals of the World Series. So this is a bucket list deal, and flights were
Hmm.
like $2,000 round trip. There was no hotel rooms.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Let's just go get in the airplane, fly up there, and see if we can get a ticket. So
Yeah.
my brother met me at Parker County. Our other buddy sat in the back and drank beer for 4 hours. We flew to Omaha, Nebraska with no tickets, no hotel room, no car. But we landed, we get to the FBO, and there's a bunch of LSU fans there, Florida fans, people coming in. And I made a phone call to a friend of mine who happened to have 4 tickets down the 13th
Oh,
line.
cool.
And within 2 hours, we were at the game with tickets we didn't have when we took off. So we went to the game. We had a walk-off win. We went and partied with the LSU fans afterwards, which actually ended up running into Joe Burrow, which was super cool. So I got to talk to Joe Burrow for a
Yeah.
while, and Todd Graves, the guy from Raising Cane's. We were at Rocco's there doing Jello shots with the team's family. And then the next day, we waited 8 hours. We waited.
Yeah. The FAA is going to
And
wait.
yeah, we waited. We were good, I promise. And we ended up, going way out and getting some cheap hotel and went back to the airport
Yeah.
the next morning. We flew home, 4 hours home, in time to watch the second game on TV. So no way any of that gets done without
No.
a
Yeah.
private pilot's license and an instrument rating and an airplane. So
Yeah.
and I think the total cost for us with the tickets, with the plane, my brother, our buddy, and me was under $2,000, which was just the commercial ticket there and back.
Flight. Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. Those sort of things. Like, it just makes it all
Hmm.
worth it. It makes dealing with the crazy maintenance cost and time and everything like that worth it. It makes dealing with all the FAA stuff, and that's the memories for life. I bet.
Yeah, and that was my first real
Uh,
interaction with wake turbulence too, with a
oh,
big
really?
airplane. Yeah,
That's scary.
we were probably 3 south of Omaha, making our descent in through some clouds. The tower comes back. They said November 36364, caution wake turbulence, Boeing 747,
Oh,
1,000 feet above you. I don't remember their heading. So I'm like, all right, y'all better you gotta get the
hold
ceiling. You
on.
might hit the ceiling in a second. I'm not sure, but we were in the clouds, And so right when we got through the clouds, I saw the 747 over us, and thankfully it was
Uh-huh.
literally right over us, so we missed the wake turbulence. But I was nervous there for about
Oof.
30 seconds. I thought we were gonna, do a barrel roll or something crazy for a second.
Yeah, that. I mean, that's frightening, particularly with a 747. That's like the probably that and the A380 probably the worst possible people to be underneath.
Right.
Kind of scary. But in terms of like you mentioned, like your weather planning is not good. But what's your sort of process? Like if you're going to take a work flight, you sort of go or no go, I guess. There's probably times where you've had to cancel. Like, how do you sort of think about, I guess, the safety factor of not being kind of pushed to go when you shouldn't?
So it depends on if it's me, just me, my family, my colleagues. I'm willing to take a little bit more of a, and I'm not really a risky pilot. Like I say I'm bad with weather.
Uh-huh.
I know I'm bad with weather. I think awareness is a big thing, right? So I know
Yeah.
I'm not as proficient with looking at all of the charts and all the low level wind shear and all that stuff. So if it's marginal, I'll probably go. But if it's my personal minimums, right? We talk about that all the time in aviation. Your
Hmm.
personal minimums, right? And if the crosswind component is, if I'm looking at a 20 mile an hour straight across the runway, I'm not going no matter what.
Yeah.
But if it's 15, gusting 20, I can catch it. I can catch a break in there somewhere. I'll usually go. I will not mess with thunderstorms no matter what. I won't fly within 30 miles of them. My go or no go is really just based on who's in the airplane. I'm a little more lenient towards just myself, but if I have other people in there, it's got to be a nice day, or I just won't go.
Hmm.
We were going to Angel Fire 2 weeks ago to go skiing with the kids, and I had flight planned to Rotan, which is on the east side of the mountain range of the Rockies on the southern point of New Mexico. There's a little bitty
Yep.
airport there, but I say little bitty. I mean, it's a 7,000 foot runway. It's big, but but you don't
Yeah.
mess with any of the mountain ranges. And if you have an engine problem, there, Texas and New Mexico, it's just that you can land.
Flat.
Uh, but Angel
Yeah.
Fire does have an airport. It's 9,000 feet by
It
100, and
does.
it's in the valley. But it's
Yep.
the DA is usually high, and it's at 800 feet.
Yeah.
So in a you know, normalized, normally aspirated piston single, unless it's a perfect day with no wind, I'm not going there. So I'd fly to Rotan
Yep.
anyway. The day came for us to go, and it was marginal at best, and we drove 9 hours. So you
Yeah.
always have to have a backup plan, right? It's not going to work out every time, but when it does, it sure is rewarding.
Totally. Yeah. It's absolutely golden when it works out, but also it's nice to be driving and be looking up and be like, maybe it was nice to drive rather than be like trying to trying to hold it together while your family's in the back or whatever, and you're trying to land there.
Yeah, and the worst part's leaving, right? Say you have a perfect day when you get there, but you're there a week, and everything can change
Yeah.
in a week. So, you get 3 inches of snow and it's blowing 40 miles an hour, and it's the day to leave, and now you've flown and you don't have your car to drive home.
Yeah. You kind of like you.
Oh, you're really in trouble because you got to rent a car, drive home, and then go pick your plane up, and
Yeah.
that can be a whole mess. The plane's in New Mexico. I'm here. I've got to have a buddy fly me there, and uh,
Totally. Yeah.
so unless I can see for 10 days and, between the day that I'm leaving and the day that I'm supposed to leave and the day after, if it's not perfect in there and my family's with me, there's a good chance that we're not going to go. But
Yeah.
personal minimums are a massive deal, right? And I don't fly to minimums. I've flown to 500 feet, 400 feet a few times, but I've never flown to 200 feet.
Yeah.
I haven't done that. I just don't think I'm a 300-hour pilot. That's not something that I want to risk just yet.
Yeah, there's a a lot to do in that last 300 feet. It's not, to rush through, and yeah, that's not my cup of tea either. I'm probably much more conservative and don't like doing that stuff. Some people love it. Some people like not being able to see the runway right until their wheels are on it, but not my jam either. And that Angel Fire Airport, I've got a turbo, and it's okay going in there, but it's kind of the approach is a little bit, and the wind can be a little bit all over the place, and the AWOS is not very accurate. It's not a fun place to be when it's not a great day and nice and clear day and not windy and all that sort of stuff. So it was probably a good plan to not be trying to take the whole family in there.
So you've flown into Angel Fire.
Yeah, we've I've done now 2 landings over there, but it is it's super long runway, as you say. Like I would never do it in the afternoon, like on a hot summer's day or whatever. I've only been in like kind of the fringes of winter. Never done a summer trip there, but yeah, super long runway. Wind, even on a calm day, the wind can be, from people I've talked to that have been there on bad days, it's still not a great. Even though it's a nice big wide open valley, it's still not a great place to go land.
Because don't they recommend? I did a little research before it and watched some YouTube videos and all this stuff before I was even thinking about going.
Mm-hmm.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in a single, turbo or not, they recommend you landing to the south and then taking off to the north over the lake.
I'm trying to remember what we did. I do remember maybe we came in and out and went in and out the same direction. The last time I was there, I had someone who's flown it a lot and in a private jet. He's also a jet pilot with me, but I can't really remember the in and out. But definitely something I wouldn't probably want to do on a bad day.
Right. Yeah. When we left, when we were driving out, there was 40-mile-an-hour winds straight out of the west, right across the road. And I'm like, well, we would not be leaving right now. I promise you that. Might be a couple days. So I was real glad we drove. But I haven't actually ever talked to anyone that's flown into there. And we try to go every year. So
yeah,
I
can connect you with a few people that do it like on a very regular basis, like corporate pilots, because a lot of people from Tulsa go skiing there or have a house there because it's relatively close. Yeah, I know certainly from the feedback that I've got, bad idea to try to do it on a summer afternoon. So
yeah. I looked last year. It was like 10-2 was the DA or something.
Yeah.
Like, ain't no shot, because at that point, right, all your V speeds are changing. Right? Your V speeds are all different at that point. You're 20% higher on everything. So yeah, you might be leaned out pretty good because you're at 10 feet, but you cannot produce the power. And if you're full fuel, you got a couple people in there. You're climbing at 100, 200 feet a minute if you're lucky, right? And
that even with the turbo, one thing I remember going out of there last time was we had just filled up, so we're pretty full and heavy, but there were only 2 of us in the plane. This is a turbo retractable 182, and so it's got a 1,200-pound useful load. So we weren't even close to the max takeoff weight or anything like that, and it was definitely like coming off the runway. I was like, oh, the stall horn! I can hear the stall horns. When it's just wiggling a little bit. I was like, whoa, we need to get the nose down a little bit here. And yeah, as you said, even the DA wasn't that bad, but that thing can usually climb at over 1,000 feet per minute, and it was just slow. And so you've got all mountains around you. You have to kind of get out through the valley, and then there's a little mountain pass kind of to the north that we went out through effectively to just have a bit of a safety margin rather than kind of getting up and going straight over the hill. Going to switch into the lightning round now. So you're flying your newly updated, what was it? What was the plane that you've got now?
It's a Cherokee 6 300, yeah.
Okay. And so you've now updated that, but what's the next plane and what's the dream plane? So what's the next stepping stone, and then where are you going after that?
God, I got to sell a lot of garage doors, but the next airplane would be a Meridian.
Nice.
I want to go to the turbine world, just for literally what we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to have a Meridian where I can put my kids, my wife in there, have a turbine aircraft, go over the tops of those Rockies and fly an approach and not worry about it, right?
Yeah.
You're talking $1 million if you're lucky on one of those. That's all, years probably away.
Yeah.
Hopefully less. We'll see. And then the end goal is PC-12.
Yep.
I'm not really interested in having 2 engines, and I know that sounds crazy. Like, we got plenty of pilot buddies that are like, "Why wouldn't you want a King Air? Why wouldn't you want a 421?" I'm like, well, for one, I know PC-12 is expensive to maintain and cost, but as one engine, you're cutting half the cost on maintenance and all that. And once you buy it, and you hopefully would have partners in there and stuff, but you got 8 seats, and if you can close the door, the thing's going to take off. Right?
Totally. Yeah.
it's just a perfect airplane for a big family and for a business too, I
Yeah.
think. Uh, I have a friend who has a 90 King Air, and he's still a corporate pilot for a
Hmm.
family out of Graham here. He flies a G150 for him, but he takes that thing all over the place, and
Yeah.
he flew for Delta for a long time and takes it down to his ranch in South Texas, and we get on this topic all the time, and he thinks I'm nuts for wanting a PC-12. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things. Every pilot is very sold on what they want, and there's different strokes for different folks. And
Yeah.
for me, the PC-12 is perfect, but I also don't have a ton of multi-time. I was able to get right, like we mentioned, these airplanes flying over here.
Yeah.
The Air Force bases next to me, and I was able to. My first multi-time I logged with an instructor was in the C-130.
What?
Uh, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
I had an Air Force CFI here who was a
Hmm.
friend of mine, and he got us in the C-130 simulator, and we spent 2 hours flying the C-130. So
Oh, that's so
uh,
cool.
my first logged multi-times in the C-130. So there's really nowhere to go
Yeah.
for me in the multi, so I figured I'd stick with the singles.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, I mean, that's amazing. Some DPE looking through your book's going to be like, what? As if you've got real time in a
Right, right.
C-130. But no, I think your path of like where you want to go is very common. And, the Turbine Suburban, the PC-12, it's ultimately what I want to get to. I don't need to go super fast, but I want to take a whole lot of people or a whole lot of stuff. And I guess for you, you could fly a whole bunch of garage door stuff all around the back of that, and at least it's tax effective maybe that way. Um,
Right.
what's your favorite aircraft you've ever flown, or fastest maybe, or what's the favorite?
Favorite one I've ever flown. Oh, that's gosh.
C-130.
Yeah, I mean it's got to be that, but that was a simulator.
Yeah,
Real life. I got to go with the. My buddy has an A36, and
yeah,
it is a rocket.
yeah.
He's done everything to it too.
Uh
Every
huh.
mod, every speed mod you can put on that thing, he's
Uh
done.
huh.
It's got a like 100-hour engine. I mean
No.
the thing's a rocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean you trade speed for useful load in that thing, right? And
Yeah.
it's got AC. I mean it's got everything that you'd expect in a King Air.
Uh huh.
He's got it in his Bonanza,
Nice.
and he let me fly that. Well, I've probably got I don't know 5 or 6 hours in it,
Yeah.
and when you go from a PA-32 Piper, right, which is
Yeah.
kind of an everyman's, so to say,
Yeah.
step up from a trainer, and then you get in a $500,000 Bonanza in a Beechcraft, it kind of makes you jealous a little bit,
Yeah.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
I'm a little jealous of you, but I'm not going to say that. I like my
Yeah.
airplane too. I think it's as far as like, general aviation planes go,
Hmm.
uh, that would probably be my favorite, and that's I haven't had a ton of experience flying separate aircraft other than my own.
Yeah.
Kind of stick to what I know, but I've got a little time in my buddy's King Air
Nice.
too because he's a CFI as
Yeah.
well. So anyway, I'd probably say the Bonanza's more
Cool.
along the lines of my mission than the
Yep.
King. So I've got to go with the bow.
Absolutely. Yeah. What a beautiful aircraft. What's a dream aviation destination for you? Like, are you an Osh person, or you want to go to Mackinac Island, or where's somewhere where you want to fly?
No, I'm not an Osh guy. I don't like crowds too
Yeah.
much. I dealt enough with crowds being on
Playing
the PC
golf.
for
Yeah.
so many years that I don't really like crowds. A dream aircraft, I'd love to fly across the ocean. I would love to
Uh
take
huh.
an airplane to the Bahamas or something one day. I think that would be awesome. All of the special radio licenses you need and
Yeah.
all that stuff that goes into it. I think that would be really fun to accomplish.
Hmm.
I don't want to do it a lot. I just want to do it one or two
Yeah.
times and say I've done it. But I'd love to go to the Bahamas in my airplane. It'd take forever, but
You can
it would.
make a week or two out of it. Stop
Right.
off along the way.
Yeah, that's the one thing that kind of holds my wife back with flying our airplane is that we have to make fuel stops and
Yep.
things. And when you're going more than 3 hours away, by the time you stop and get fuel and stuff, and you could buy your commercial ticket, a month in advance, and it's probably a better option,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
That's always her argument. But I'm like, but it won't be as fun. You know,
Exactly.
she doesn't understand the fun part because she's in the back playing with the kids.
Yeah.
So she's like, well, it's not fun for me, you know, and stuff. Like, well, you have a point. So
Yeah.
I'd like to go to Bahamas. I think that would be really, really cool one day. I got to wait for my kids to be a little older where we don't need a bathroom break every 30
Yeah.
minutes.
Tell me about it. What's some advice for, you know, other pilot entrepreneurs or people who maybe want to fly and run a business? You know, what advice would you give?
Man, I always I tell people if they're interested in flying, go take an introductory flight. You know, it's less than $100. You know, and you will know in the first 30 minutes it's for you. You will know. And don't do it on the summer day where it's 100 degrees. Where you're walking around everywhere. Go on a nice day where it's 60 degrees, it's clear clouds, and give it a fair shot. Right? You give it a fair shot for that hour or whatever that intro flight is, and you'll know really quick if it's for you, because it's not for everybody. That's what I tell everyone. You know, it's not for everyone. Most people don't like being in a small plane. They don't like the challenge of their life in their own hands, right? And statistically, right, you're safer in the air than you are on the ground, especially with, you know, texting and driving and everything that goes on these roads nowadays. And I try to explain all those stats to people, and they look at me like I have 5 heads, because all they hear about when an airplane crashes is the worst of the worst, right?
Yeah.
Well, 90% of airplane crashes are on the ground, right? They're taxed, but they only hear about the family that died when they were going to their reunion or something, and it scares people. But that's what I tell people. You know, if they're listening to this and they're thinking about becoming a pilot, they're not sure if they want to do it, just go spend the $150. Do the intro flight, and you'll know immediately if you want to keep doing it.
No, absolutely. That's great advice. Well, wrapping things up, where should people find you and find Westoplex Garage?
We're in Fort Worth, Texas. We're west of Dallas. We service everything from here to Brock, which, you know, we got about an hour both sides. And we talked about Houston, you know, bigger jobs. We're able to travel and bid things all over the state, you know, thanks to flying. So we've got socials. You know, we've got I think we've got almost 30,000 followers between our social media accounts, mine included, which a lot of those people don't care about. They don't care about aviation. They care about the golf that I did 10 years ago, right? But I still got a lot of people that, you know, that care about what's going on and what's going on with the company, and the flying thing seems pretty cool to most people because it's something that they don't know a lot about.
Totally.
And they're curious more than anything as to the nuts and bolts of why I fly, why we fly, why we use it. And I think it's interesting for most people to follow along when we mix flying with business. And
totally. Well, I'll put all the links to your socials in the show notes, so hopefully people can go and add to that 30,000 and engage with you a little bit. But John, I really want to say thanks for sharing all your insight and telling us a little bit about your journey and everything like that. It's been great to chat, and we'll speak soon.
Of course, Simon. Yeah, thanks for having me, man. And blue skies and tailwinds, dude. Always.
Absolutely. Have a good day. See you, John.
Yeah, see you, man.
Hey, thanks for flying with us today. If you're getting value from these conversations with other pilot entrepreneurs and executives, do me a really quick favor. Hit that subscribe button or the follow button, depending on what app you're using, so you'll never miss another episode. And if you've got an extra minute and you loved us, drop us a 5-star review. Those reviews help other aviation-minded business folk find us, and honestly, they really just make my day. What about you? Have you got a story about using your plane to grow your business, or maybe someone you know? Well, shoot me a message on X at Simon G. Turner or at the Chief Executive Aviator podcast, or pop me an email, simon@turneraircraft.com. See you on the next Chief Executive Aviator.